Hello and welcome back to Puerto Rico Life. My name is Jeffrey Holst, and I am talking to you about the reasons you should not move to Puerto Rico to save on your taxes. So now most people are saying, oh, Puerto Rico is amazing. You should save on your taxes and you're going to get a little bit of this in your life and that's going to be amazing. And you're not going to pay taxes and everything's going to be amazing. And I know that's a lot of amazings, but here's the thing. You should not move to Puerto Rico if your goal is just to save on taxes. And I'm going to give you 3 reasons why right now. Okay, so here's the first one. You can't just show up and get special tax treatment. So there's these discussions and blogs and videos going on all around the internet. And you're seeing things like, if you just move to Puerto Rico, you're going to pay 0% on capital gains, 0% on interest income, and 0% on dividends. Well, that's sort of true, but it's not entirely true. For one thing, if you're selling something that's the income is sourced outside of Puerto Rico, that's not going to be the case at all, no matter what. But that's not even true that there's 0% interest income or 0% capital gains tax in Puerto Rico. That's only true if you get a grant from the government called an individual investor grant, and you go through that process and you get the grant, and then only going to apply to things that are Puerto Rican sourced income and only in certain circumstances. Now, I'm not a tax advisor. I don't want to give you tax advice. I just want to say this. You can't just show up and get special tax treatment. You actually have to go through the process. The process involves doing a bunch of steps. So that brings us to reason number 2, that you should not move to Puerto Rico just to save on your taxes, and that is it's expensive. It costs a lot of money to get a grant. It can cost $20,000 a year. I mean, the individual investor grant, it's going to require you to pay $5,000 a year in annual filing fees to the Puerto Rican government, donate $10,000 a year to charity, not to mention you're going to have a bunch of compliance costs on top of that. It's probably going to cost you $20,000 to $25,000 a year. So unless you have a lot of investments that qualify under the individual investor grant exemption for capital gains, for interest income, for things like that, then it's not going to make good sense to you. Like, I'm going to move to Puerto Rico. I want to move to Puerto Rico, but I'm not even sure I'm going to do the individual investor grant. Now, there are other grants, and that's the thing. It's very complicated. You've got to go through that process. You're going to have to hire someone, a relocation specialist, and I'll put in the show notes the link to one of the relocation specialists that I've been talking to, who I really, really love, and that maybe will help you as well. But the thing is, it's expensive and it's complicated. Now, there are other grants, right? Like there's grants for people who are in tourism industries. There's a thing called export services. That one's a little bit cheaper, right? But that requires you to start a business that exports something off of the island. So if you start a tiki bar, Puerto Rico, afraid you're going to still pay Puerto Rican tax on that. Now, you might not have to pay U.S.-based income tax, and that's great, but the income sourced in Puerto Rico is going to be taxed in Puerto Rico, and that's not a 0% tax. There's no such thing as not paying taxes. Taxes are everywhere, but you've got to go through the process. You've got to get good advisors. You've got to hire CPAs, lawyers, specialists. You've got to go through a process where you sign an agreement with the government that gives you an exemption for a period of time from paying those taxes. You can't just get that. It's just not like, bam, I show up in Puerto Rico, now I don't pay taxes anymore. If that was the case, I'd tell you to go right now, but that's not the case. So reason number 3 that you should not move to Puerto Rico just to save on your taxes is that you actually have to live there. Now, I know people say, oh, you only have to be there 183 days, and, that's only half the year. Or maybe if you're not there, maybe if you just buy a place there and, pretend you live there, you can get away with it. Well, that's not true. You actually have to live there, for real, not joking. You can't pretend. You actually have to move there. The test isn't what you see on the internet all the time, that you just have to be there 183 days a year. The test is that you have to move to Puerto Rico. You have to uproot your life and live in Puerto Rico. Now, I'm willing to do that because I want to live in Puerto Rico. Like, I need more of that beach in my life, like I showed earlier. Like, I want to be by the ocean. I want to have tropical breeze blowing around in my balding head. When I shave my head, I'll be able to put sunblock directly on my head. It'll be amazing. But here's the thing. You have to actually live there. So, yes, you have to be there at least 183 days a year. It's a rule. And again, by the way, just so you guys know, I am not giving accounting, tax advice or any of that. But the point is, you have to actually move to Puerto Rico. Actually have to live there. Yes, you're going to need to sign a lease, or you're going to need to buy a place, but you're going to have to do things like change your driver's license, things like register to vote, like join community organizations. You have to be more in Puerto Rico than anywhere else, which means you're going to have to sell your house in the United States or rent it out or something. You have to get rid of it. You have to be more in Puerto Rico than here. So I live in Chattanooga right now. I have a house. I'm in my basement of my house right now. You can see all my cool books and my really old school paneling, right? I got to get my house ready to sell. I'm going to have to paint the paneling because I got to sell my house. If I'm going to move to Puerto Rico, I can't just pretend to live in Puerto Rico and spend some time here and some time there. I got to actually live in Puerto Rico, and you need to do that too. So anyway, just a quick recap. There are 3 reasons that I come up with just now off the top of my head. Well, not really off the top of my head. I thought about them earlier today, that you should not move to Puerto Rico just to get the tax treatment. And the first one is, you can't just show up. You got to actually go through the steps. And then 2, it's expensive and complicated to go through the steps. And then 3, you actually have to live there, like for real, not joking. You can't just pretend. So there you go. Those are the 3 reasons why you should not move to Puerto Rico just to save money on your taxes. Now, that isn't to say you shouldn't move to Puerto Rico and save money on your taxes. I mean, listen, if you want to live in Puerto Rico, I want to live in Puerto Rico. That's why I started this channel, so I could start getting ready and getting used to living in Puerto Rico. So if you want to live in Puerto Rico, that's great. And if you're going to live in Puerto Rico anyway, and you can take advantage of the tax savings, also great. And you know what? Listen, if you're thinking, hey, I want to move to the Caribbean someday for some reason, like it'd be cool. Like maybe you're like Jeff and Becky, my wife, and you're like, sometime like around the time I turn 45, we're going to move to the Caribbean and we're going to live by the beach and it's going to be amazing. And I'm going to turn 43 here next month. Well, actually later this month, in about 2 weeks. And you might say, you know what? If I get the tax advantages, if I do an export services, if I get the individual investor grant, if I do whatever, there's a whole bunch of them. And this is beyond the scope of this video. But you might say, you know what? If I do that, I can move to Puerto Rico instead of to, Aruba or something, right? Like, I wouldn't mind living in Aruba. Aruba's beautiful, but Aruba's going to tax me in a different way. And I'm still going to have to pay taxes in the U.S. Now, by the way, that's another thing, not tax advice again, but just because you live in Puerto Rico doesn't mean that your U.S.-based income just becomes tax-free. You actually have to pay taxes on it if you earn it in the U.S. So keep that in mind. And if you decide you want to move to Puerto Rico, definitely check out the show notes. Check out my friend Angela. Check out the various resources that I put in the show notes that help you figure out if it makes sense, or just reach out to me and I'm happy to make an introduction for you. My email is in every single video show notes. And by the way, if you're liking my content, I would love it. I mean, love it. Like, you would be my favorite if you would like and subscribe. So hit the little like button, give me a thumbs up, go subscribe to the show, ring the little bell on there, right down, right, I think, oops, that side, got a mirror image. So hit the little bell thing so you get notified every time that I post a new video. And then also, if you really, really like me, then you could share the channel with other people that you know and say, hey, check out this channel about this guy. He's crazy. He's decided to move to Puerto Rico on a whim. Like, he went there for 3 days. And then all of a sudden he was like, holy cow, why don't I live in Puerto Rico? And that's really what happened. And so now it's April 12th, 2021. It's been maybe 3 weeks since the time I was in Puerto Rico and decided randomly that I wanted to live there. And I'm making plans to move later this year, or maybe even the beginning of next year. Now, I don't think I can do it in time to get my tax treatment. Remember, expensive, complicated. You actually have to live there. You can't just show up. Like, I don't think I can do that in time to get my tax treatment for this year, but I'm still going to try to move sometime towards the end of this year so that next year I'm going to be living in Puerto Rico. I'm not going to have a place in Chattanooga. Or if I do, it's going to be like a hotel room that I come when I come to visit my friends or something, because I'm moving to Puerto Rico. And maybe you should too. I mean, I know the title of this video is Don't Move to Puerto Rico to Save on Your Taxes, but that doesn't mean you shouldn't live in Puerto Rico. And if you decide to live in Puerto Rico because of this video, make sure you let me know. And if I'm living in Puerto Rico and you're living in Puerto Rico, who knows? We might be friends. Anyway, have a great day. Adios, and welcome to Puerto Rico. By the way, I have other Spanish language videos. There's the playlist somewhere over here, maybe. Anyway, I'll put the playlist above. I'm trying to learn Spanish because if you're going to live in Puerto Rico, like actually live in Puerto Rico, like for real, you do, not joking, you can't just pretend, you should probably learn a little Spanish because you know what? Puerto Ricans speak Spanish. Okay, have a great day. Talk to you soon.